Hi friends, my name is Anna Helman and this is my 6th video in my Get Started Stamping series. Today we are talking about card making tools. Tools can make or break your crafting experience. Good ones can make it easier and more fun. Not very good ones can make it more frustrating and definitely less fun. So we're going to make a beautiful card as we go through today's video. I'm going to share with you a lot of different things about how to use tools and my suggestions when you're looking for tools. I hope you'll watch along. So this is the card we're going to recreate with a few variations, a few differences from it, but we're going to use a lot of different tools. We use a paper trimmer, punches, die cutting, embossing, blending brushes, and I'll just walk you through it to hopefully help you learn about card making tools. And maybe if you already have been using these things, maybe you'll learn a few things as well. So what we will do first, we're going to prepare our card bases and the paper pieces that we need. So I'll start with my sheet of 8.5 by 11 cardstock. This is fresh freesia. I share my paper trimmer fairly often. I love this paper trimmer for several reasons. It has an arm that comes out and goes to 17 inches. It has the cutting and the scoring blade, and I just find that I really like this trimmer and I'm very happy with it. So I'm going to line this up at 4 1/4 and use the scoring blade to score my card base in half, my sheet of paper in half. Line it up at 5 1/2 and cut that in half. So now I have 2 card bases ready. I get a lot of questions about the lines on my trimmer, and I put those on there to make it easier to do my cutting and my scoring for my card bases and my card mats. So I'll link in the video description below to a video where you can find out more about that if you're interested. Now, I want to create another piece, actually, the one we're going to do a little bit different from the sample I showed you, and I want a piece for the top that measures 4 by 5 1/4. And then I will also need a few strips to stamp the leaves. And I'll need some from the glimmer paper as well. So for this one, I just need, actually I'll bring in a piece that's not scored. I'll save that for my next card base. So I need a piece that's going to be at least this wide and one at least this wide. So to make sure it's wide enough, we'll cut one 2 inches and we'll cut one 1.5 inches. And then let's cut some glimmer paper. So with trimmers on the market, you'll find there are a lot of different qualities of trimmers, and there are a lot of trimmers that are not very good ones out there. So I suggest when you're looking for a trimmer, you really try and find a good one with some nice features. This is a really great one. I'll have links in the video description below to all the products I'm using if you're interested. Okay, so we have our pieces prepared, I believe. Now let's look at our stamps. And I'll talk for a minute about acrylic blocks. I will call these a tool for today. We'll talk about them for a minute. So with your stamps, they do not come with a block, so you'll need some separate acrylic blocks to mount them to. I love our Stampin' Up! Blocks. If you try out different blocks, you'll see there's different sizes, different shapes. A lot of them are thinner than this. A lot of them are sharp on the edges, and they're just not very comfortable to hold. I love these for several reasons. They have the little groove. Can you see the little groove for your fingers in the top and the bottom? And it's on all 4 sides. So if you end up holding it one of the other directions, those are on all the sides, but they're just really comfortable to use because they're thick. I find it's a lot easier to ink my stamp without getting my fingers into the ink pad. I have that problem with thinner blocks, but really like these blocks. So I just wanted to mention that quick, that when you get your stamps out, you can mount them to the block, and then after you're done and they're clean, you just pull it back off and put the stamp back in your case. Now let's do a little bit of stamping, and then we're gonna look at a punch. Punches are a tool that can really make it nice and really help your stamping and card making experience. They're so easy to use and can really make some beautiful pieces for you to add to your projects. So I am going to stamp, we'll stamp 3 of these coming down this direction. And let's stamp a couple of these small ones as well. This set that I'm using is a really neat one that has the coordinating stamps and with the punch. So here's a punch. There are a lot of different kinds of punches out there. A lot of them take up more space. They're a lot more bulky. One of the reasons I love these is because they're fairly small and they're extremely well made. These punches last for years and years. I've been using, I started with Stampin' Up! 10 years ago. So some of those punches I got at the very beginning are still here, still in my collection, still doing a great job. So what I do, because I'm right-handed, I like to line up my paper in my punch, and I can squeeze it enough to hold the paper in place and make sure I have it where I want it. Once I'm sure I have it where I want it, I can use both hands to squeeze, and it just punches right out of there. So here are the larger leaves that I want to use. Now let's punch out these smaller ones. Punches are so nice because it is so quick and easy to create these cute little detailed pieces. Now maybe the punches are just basic shapes like circles or squares or tags, and those are great too. But you can do some detailed pieces such as these if you want to. I love to use dies in my card making. We'll get to embossing and die cutting here in a little bit. So dies are really nice too, but it does take a little bit more investment up front to purchase the die cutting machine. And it does take a little bit longer when you want to create those pieces. Punches are just really quick and easy. So here we have 2 of the small ones. Here are 3 of those larger ones. And we have some of the glimmer pieces as well. What I want to do next is create the piece for the front of the card. So we have our piece that we created, we cut, that measures 4 by 5 1/4. And I'll bring in some scrap paper behind this. We are going to use blending brushes for a minute. And to do this, I am going to bring in a template I created with my punch. If you can see, I punched out of this. This is a piece of acetate window sheet. Basically, it's just thin plastic. And it makes a perfect template or stencil or mask to be able to do some different techniques with. So what I'm going to do is just put this over my card mat and start applying some ink. So while I do this, I'll share a little bit about the blending brushes with you. The way I like to use them is to pick up the ink using a circular motion like you just saw, and then apply the ink to my card in the same way using a circular motion. You do want to, when I'm not using a template like this, I like to blot my excess ink on some scrap paper before I start blending on the card. Because I'm using the stencil here, I don't really have to worry about that too much. But you can use blending brushes in a lot of different ways. I like to apply ink around the edges of a project just to make it glow a little bit. You can stamp an outline image like a flower, for example, or a tree, and then you can blend the ink inside instead of coloring it with markers or pencils. You could blend some ink inside with the blending brushes. Just a lot of neat ways to use them. And here I'll apply some faded a little bit without re-inking to get some color variation in here. You can make the color darker either by applying more ink to your brush or by pushing harder with more pressure. Or sometimes I find that I really just need to get a darker color of ink. If I'm using too light of a color of ink, sometimes I just grab a darker color. So you can see we created a really neat background here. And now we're going to change this up a little bit from the sample card I shared with you, because I want to show you how to use embossing folders. So we'll do a little bit of die cutting and embossing here. I'll bring in my die cutting and embossing machine. I really love this die cutting and embossing machine. I used to have a Big Shot, and overall I've been a lot happier since I got this new machine. One thing I love about it is that the sides fold up, so it is really nice and pretty to store on my shelf. This also makes it easier to carry, and it doesn't take up nearly as much space. So that's one thing. It also cuts really, really well. And it has this handy chart on the platform that tells me which pieces I need to use, and they're numbered here. So for embossing, I have a 3D embossing folder here. It's going to tell me I need plates 1 and plate 4 with my embossing folder in the center. So we are going to emboss this piece we just created. So it has that nice pattern, and now we're also going to add some texture to it with the embossing folder. Then we put plate 4 over the top, push it in till it catches, then we'll crank it through. And I love to remove my pieces from the embossing folders because they're always just so beautiful. Isn't that pretty? This embossing folder is called Eyelet. So now that we have that, I do want to die cut a piece for the tag as well, while we have the die cutting and embossing machine here. So for die cutting, it's going to tell me I need plates 1, 2, and then both of my clear plates 3. So here's 2, here's my cutting plate 3. Then I need to put my die down and my other cutting plate 3. Now, one thing you may want to take a look at on my YouTube channel is my tips and tricks videos. One of them is how to keep your cutting plates flat on your die cutting machine. It's really frustrating when they get warped. It makes it a lot harder to keep your dies where you want them and to crank everything through. So make sure you subscribe to my channel, and definitely at some point click on my name below and you can go check out my tips and tricks playlist on my channel. Okay, now that we have our tag created, let's do one more technique. And this is another tool that may not be quite as common, but it is... This is something with card making that a lot of people fall in love with. I've heard, actually, the founder of our company, this, I believe, was the technique that made her fall in love with card making. So what we're going to do is heat embossing. And to do heat embossing, I'm going to need a special kind of ink. It's called Versamark. I also want my embossing buddy. This is going to remove any static or moisture from my piece of paper so that the embossing powder that we apply doesn't stick to any places I don't want it to. So I'll ink my stamp, stamp it right on here. Now I'm going to apply that powder over the top. Shake it a little bit, make sure I got all the areas covered nicely. And if you do have powder sticking to any extra spots, you can give it a little flick on the back that can usually help that to fall off. So I can shake this extra powder back into the container and reuse it next time. And now I need to use my heat tool to heat set this. And I'm going to grab my reverse tweezers. These come in our Embossing Editions toolkit that has the embossing buddy as well. So I'm going to turn on my heat tool and hold this as closely as I can. I'm hoping that as this powder melts that you will actually be able to see it. So I'll let the tool heat up just a little bit, and then I'll just hold it here to my piece where the powder is, and it takes a few seconds and then it will actually start to melt and turn glossy. So there it goes. Hoping you can see that. And I'll move this around a little bit so hopefully you can see how it went from a powder to a glossy shine. So pretty amazing technique. You can do some really, really amazing things with heat embossing. Now I think we are ready to assemble our card. So let's bring all of our pieces in. Here is our card base, and I'll fold this in half. Use my bone folder to give it a nice good crease. One tip with folding your cards: when you have your score line, if you put the mountain of the score line, the part that pops up, if you have it facing up, I find that my cards crease and lay flat a little better than if I have the valley, the lower part. I keep the lower part on the bottom and the mountain on the top, and it actually creases a little bit nicer this way. So here's our sample card. Like I said, we changed this one up a little bit. We added this piece on top and we embossed it. So let's attach that first, and then we can add all of those pretty leaves to the top. So the way I like to attach small pieces such as these to my projects is often with glue dots. So this is how I do it sometimes, and I'll actually show you one other way as well. Glue dots are great because they're pre-dried sticky dots, and they just make it really easy to attach. A lot of times I use them for bows, but they're great for these as well. Now the other thing that can be make this easier to attach these small pieces is, since this tag is going to be here, I can run adhesive back behind where the tag is going to be. And as long as I don't get too much so that it's coming out from outside from where the tag will be, then I can just lay these pieces on and they should cling to some of that adhesive. Now, I'm laying these on very, very lightly right now because I'm not sure if they're in the places I want them to be. So a lot of times I'll lay things out like this and just kind of test it out, see if I like the way they look. Then I can put my tag over top and see if I like that, and I do. So I'll go ahead and press all of these down. Now I've got a couple of these little ones. So we'll add those over top. And I'll attach this tag with some foam dimensionals. I don't want to leave my take your pick tool out from this talk about tools, because this is a really great one. Some of these small inexpensive tools can really make a big difference with your card making. So this is one way I like to use it. If you ever have a hard time with your fingers with applying small pieces like this or removing the paper backing, this tool can be really helpful. And actually, I think my favorite way to use it is with gems and rhinestones. So I'll show that to you here in a second. So put the tag on here. Here's my bow. I am going to attach it with a glue dot. And these glue dots are a little too big. So what I'm going to do is roll it up into a little teeny roll with my finger. And then it's the right size to go behind that bow. So we'll put that there. And one more use for the take your pick tool. It has two ends, of course, but then this piece is interchangeable. So it's got the piercing tip, the spatula tip I use a lot of times to remove pieces if I've put something on in the wrong spot. And then it also has another piece that interchanges with this. That is a stylus for scoring. So here I have my gems, and this sticky end makes it really easy to pick up the gems and put them where I want them, much easier than if I was doing this with my fingers. So I hope this video helped you get familiar with some of these card making tools, whether you're new to card making or have been doing it for a long time. And I hope this is a card idea you can use sometime here soon in your crafting. So here you can see the first card, and here you can see our finished one that we just completed. So it's time to chat. This is what we do at the end of my videos now. One of the things I've shared several times probably is how I have realized that evil has just infiltrated so much, like pretty much everything in our world. And while this sounds, I want the talks at the end of these videos to bring you light and bring you hope. So while this sounds depressing and not very optimistic, when we can be aware of these things, friends, we can fight against them and we can change our lives. We can change the world. So evil infiltrating things, friends, there are so many, all parts of our lives are under attack. Our minds, our bodies, our marriages, our families, our children, all things are under attack, okay? If we are depressed, if we're anxious, if we're unwell, if our marriages are broken, if our families are broken, we're probably going to stay home and be sad and not bring light to this world. It's not a coincidence, okay? But if we know what's going on and we can fight appropriately against these things, we are not the ones who lose. So today I wanted to talk a little bit about marriage. I am divorced once. My current husband and I, we've been married for 5 years, and we have fought a battle, my friends. If marriage isn't hard enough the first time, the second time around, when you have like all the added complications of kids going to different homes and like all the blended family stuff, like it's really under attack the second time. It is challenging. But I was introduced to a book here not too long ago that I wanted to share with you, because the things that we are taught by this world, they don't usually bring us light and hope. And sometimes it's really hard to find the other things that are going to make our lives better. And so I was introduced to this book. It is called Created to Be His Helpmeet. Created to Be His Helpmeet. It's written by Debbie Pearl. And this is it's a book about marriage. It is a book about what a woman can do to fix a marriage just by herself, just by conducting ourselves the way that we should, the way that the Bible tells us we should, how we can fix a marriage and how we can make a difference and we can be living God's purpose for our life, regardless of what our husband is doing, because we don't control him, we control us, right? So this book it's from a very different perspective than the world gives us on, like, my husband isn't doing this, and why should I do that if he's not doing this, and all these things. Like, this is written from this perspective that we do what we're supposed to do, regardless of whatever is going on with him, whatever he's doing. And what's amazing is, in a lot of cases, when somebody recommended this to me, she told me that it saved her marriage. She told me that it saved her sister's marriage. And I believe that this book has probably saved more marriages than anyone could count. It is from a very different perspective. You may be reading through it and think, like, I can't believe she's supporting her husband when he's doing these things, or why would we say that this is what a woman should do if a man is doing X? But it is good to fill our minds with things that are different than what the world tells us, because the world doesn't want you and I to be happy. I don't think the world doesn't want us to be full of light and full of hope and positivity and to have families that are flourishing. So if we want something different, we're going to have to look for different ideas to get us there. So look up the book, Created to Be His Helpmeet by Debbie Pearl. Thanks for being here, my friends. I appreciate you. I hope you have a blessed day, and I hope you'll be back again next time when I'll be here helping you to handmake with love.